The small, peaceful planet of Velmera had always been known for its beauty. Covered in vast forests, sparkling rivers, and towering mountains, it was a place of knowledge and culture. The Velmerans, the inhabitants of the planet, were gentle, intelligent beings who valued wisdom and science. They had never known war or conflict, and their lives were dedicated to learning and teaching. However, that peaceful existence was about to be shattered. One dark day, the skies above Velmera were filled with the terrifying roar of enemy ships. The HFY Dominion, a ruthless alien empire known for conquering weaker planets, had decided that Velmera would be their next target. Their ships arrived in a deadly swarm, blocking out the sun with their sheer numbers. The HFY were known for their advanced weaponry and brutal tactics. They took no prisoners and showed no mercy. Velmera, with its small population and lack of military strength, was no match for them. As the HFY landed on Velmera's surface, the Velmerans sent out an urgent distress signal. They pleaded for help from the greater galaxy, hoping that the powerful species of the Galactic Council would come to their aid. The Council, a group of different alien species that governed the stars, had always promised peace and protection. But when the Velmerans called for help, they were met with silence. The Galactic Council, for reasons unknown, chose to ignore the plea. Perhaps they believed Velmera was not important enough, or maybe they thought it would be too costly to intervene. Whatever the reason, the Velmerans were left to face the full force of the HFY on their own. With their planet falling under the control of the HFY, the Velmerans were desperate. They had no allies and no means of defense. The HFY were relentless, capturing cities, destroying homes, and taking anyone who resisted as prisoners. The Velmerans were on the brink of extinction. But just as all hope seemed lost, something unexpected happened. A message was received from Earth, a young and somewhat unknown planet in the far corner of the galaxy. It was a simple message, sent without much fanfare. "We are humanity. We will help." At first, the Velmerans did not know what to make of it. Humanity was a species that had only recently become part of the Galactic Council. They were young and inexperienced, often seen as too primitive to be of much help. Earth had no great military power, no advanced technology like the other civilizations. Many in the Galactic Council had written off humanity as insignificant. But now, Earth was offering aid. On Earth, news of Velmera's plight spread quickly. While the Galactic Council had ignored the call for help, the people of Earth had not. Despite having little in terms of resources or military strength, humans were known for their strong sense of justice. They could not stand by and watch an innocent species suffer, especially when it was clear that the powerful galactic races were unwilling to act. Admiral Elias Carter, a seasoned leader of Earth's military forces, immediately took charge. He had seen many battles, but he had also seen the power of human resilience. He knew that humanity had something the other species did not: the determination to fight for what was right, even against overwhelming odds. He gathered a team of the best soldiers, strategists, and engineers Earth had to offer. "We are humanity," Admiral Carter said to his crew, "and we don't leave people behind. We'll fight for Velmera, no matter what." The Velmerans, still reeling from the shock of their planet being invaded, could hardly believe that help had finally arrived. They had expected the Council to send ships, to send armies, but what they got instead was something far more unexpected: humans. The message was clear. Humanity was here, and they would not allow Velmera to fall. The humans were not the biggest or the most powerful species in the galaxy, but they had something else: courage and an unshakable belief in standing up for others. They had never backed down from a fight, and they weren't going to start now. As the human fleet began to assemble, the Velmerans watched in awe. They had never seen such determination in any species before. Humanity might not have been the most advanced, but they had something far greater: heart. And in the face of the HFY's might, it was that heart that would make all the difference. With the promise of aid from Earth, Velmera's people found a new spark of hope. The Excelsior had underestimated humanity. The galaxy had turned its back, but now it would soon see what humans were capable of. As the first human ships arrived in the skies of Velmera, the planet's inhabitants could hardly believe their eyes. They were simple people, scholars and farmers, not warriors. The sight of the human fleet was both a relief and a mystery. The humans were different from what they had imagined. They didn't look like the powerful, advanced alien species that had once been their neighbors in the Galactic Council. They were much more human. Their ships were smaller, their technology less polished, but there was something about them that felt alive. The Velmerans could sense it. The humans were determined. The Velmeran delegation, led by Ambassador Kalia, met with Admiral Elias Carter in the heart of their capital. The air was thick with tension as the two sides came face to face for the first time. The Velmerans were still trying to understand why Earth had sent help. After all, the Galactic Council had turned its back on them. What could a small, inexperienced planet like Earth offer that would make any difference? Ambassador Kalia studied Admiral Carter carefully. He looked young, his face weathered from years of military service, but there was a calmness in his eyes, as though he had seen it all before. Yet Kalia could see the fire in him. The fire of someone who would not leave the oppressed to suffer. "You're certain your people can help?" Kalia asked, her voice shaky but determined. "The Excelsior have overrun entire star systems. They are ruthless. They will not show mercy, not even to your people." Admiral Carter gave a small nod. "We've seen what the Excelsior are capable of," he said, his voice low but full of resolve. "But we don't back down. We fight for those who can't fight for themselves." Kalia looked uncertain. Humanity's story was still new to the galaxy. They were known for being impulsive and unpredictable, often diving into situations with little understanding of the consequences. But there was something different about Carter and his crew. As the days passed, Kalia watched them work, watched them plan, and slowly she began to understand. Humans were not like the other species of the galaxy. They didn't have centuries of tradition or ancient knowledge, but they had something more powerful. They had the strength of will. They had the courage to face impossible odds and the resilience to keep fighting, even when all seemed lost. As the human fleet prepared for its first mission, the Velmerans couldn't help but be amazed by their energy. The humans didn't just wait for orders or sit behind screens like the other species had. They were out there in the field, side by side with Velmera's soldiers, learning about the land, the people, and the culture. They took time to understand everything, from the layout of the cities to the smallest details of the Velmeran defense systems. One evening, as the sun set over the war-torn landscape of Velmera, Admiral Carter gathered his commanders. Kalia, who had reluctantly agreed to join, was there too. The atmosphere was tense, but Carter was as calm as ever. He looked at each face in the room before speaking. "We don't have the luxury of time," Carter said. "The Excelsior are relentless, but they've never faced an enemy like us. We don't fight with the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons. We fight with our hearts, our minds, and our courage." Kalia couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell inside her. It was the first time since the invasion that she felt something other than fear. Humans may not have been the most powerful species in the galaxy, but they were the most determined. That determination would be their greatest weapon. For the first time, the Velmerans felt a sense of hope, a hope that had long been lost. They began to trust in the humans. The alliance between the Velmerans and Earth grew stronger by the day. The humans taught them new strategies, ways of thinking, and fighting. But they also learned from the Velmerans. The Velmerans showed them that knowledge and intelligence could be just as powerful as brute strength. On the battlefield, the humans were fearless. They did not wait for orders. They rushed into the fray, sometimes without thinking of the consequences. But that recklessness had its advantages. It threw the Excelsior off balance. It confused them. The Excelsior were used to facing battles with clear, predictable patterns, but the humans were unpredictable. They did things that made no sense, things that disrupted the enemy's plans. One night, after a particularly hard-fought battle, Kalia sat with Carter and the other human officers. She marveled at how, despite the heavy losses, none of them seemed discouraged. "You never seem to give up," she said quietly. Carter smiled faintly. "We don't give up because there's always a way forward. As long as we have each other, we can keep moving. We'll never stop fighting for what's right." Kalia didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in weeks, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. And it wasn't just the hope that came from the possibility of survival. It was the hope that, even if they lost everything, they would still fight. Humanity would never give up. As the days passed, the alliance between humanity and Velmera grew stronger. The Velmerans, once hesitant, now looked to the humans with admiration. They had taught the Velmerans new ways of thinking, new tactics, and even ways to fortify their cities. The Velmerans had always believed that knowledge was their greatest strength, but the humans had shown them that there were other kinds of power, like the power of unity and courage. Admiral Carter and his team had been working tirelessly to prepare for the next strike against the Excelsior. The humans had trained alongside Velmeran soldiers, sharing ideas and forming strategies. The time had come for action. This would be their first real test, and if they failed, it could be their last chance to turn the tide of the war. In the war room, Carter stood in front of a large holographic map of Velmera. The enemy's movements were clearly marked, showing where their forces had gathered. It was time to take the fight to them. "We've been pushing back their patrols for days," Carter said, his voice steady and confident. "But this time, we go on the offensive. The Excelsior have taken too much of our land, and it's time we show them that we're not backing down." The Velmerans stood around him, listening carefully. Ambassador Kalia, who had grown to trust Carter and his team, stepped forward. "Where do we start?" she asked. "We take their supply lines," Carter replied. "The Excelsior are powerful, but they depend on their supply chains. If we cut them off, we'll cripple their ability to fight back." The plan was simple but daring. The Excelsior had set up multiple supply camps across the planet, each one heavily guarded. If they could disrupt these camps, the Excelsior would lose their edge in the fight. Carter looked at his team, the group of humans who had quickly become experts in Velmera's terrain. They were ready. He knew it. But the Velmerans had doubts. They had never been in a real battle before. The idea of attacking the enemy directly felt foreign to them. "We can do this," Carter said, his eyes meeting theirs. "We've already proven we can work together. Now, we prove we can win together." The night before the mission, the tension was thick in the air. Velmera's soldiers had never fought a war like this before. They were trained in defense, not offense. They had no idea what it would feel like to face the Excelsior in a full-scale battle. Kalia walked through the camp, trying to calm her nerves. She saw the humans, soldiers who were preparing themselves just like the Velmerans. They were focused, serious, and most importantly, determined. There were no complaints, no doubts. They were ready for whatever came next. One of the human soldiers, a young man named Private Jackson, noticed Kalia walking by and waved at her. "Don't worry," he said with a grin. "We've got your back." It was the first time Kalia had seen the human soldiers this relaxed, and it gave her a small sense of reassurance. If they could be this confident, maybe they had a chance after all. As dawn broke, the alliance moved into position. The skies were quiet for now, but Kalia knew that wouldn't last. The Excelsior would soon realize they were under attack. The first wave of soldiers, a mix of humans and Velmerans, moved silently through the dense forests surrounding the supply camp. Carter and Kalia led the charge, their hearts beating faster with every step. The Excelsior wouldn't know what hit them. The battle began with a loud explosion, shaking the ground beneath them. The humans had used their knowledge of guerrilla tactics to plant charges near the supply depot. The explosion sent the Excelsior forces scrambling, their advanced weapons useless in the chaos. The human and Velmaran soldiers charged forward, taking advantage of the confusion. Kalia, who had never fought in such a battle before, was amazed at the speed and precision of the humans. They moved with purpose, their eyes focused on the task at hand. They didn't hesitate. They didn't falter. They fought. For the Velmarans, it was a shock. They had always believed they were not warriors, but they found themselves fighting side by side with the humans. And with every moment, they grew stronger, braver. The XL Zor retaliated quickly, sending in reinforcements, but the humans were ready. They had anticipated the move, setting up ambush points along the XL Zor's route. The XL Zor forces were caught in a deadly trap. The battle raged on, but the humans and Velmarans were relentless. Hours passed, and the camp began to fall. The XL Zor, unable to maintain their defense, started to retreat. It was a decisive victory, but the cost had been high. Many soldiers, both human and Velmaran, had fallen in the fight. The XL Zor had been stopped, but the battle was far from over. As the dust settled and the sounds of gunfire died down, Kalia walked through the wreckage, taking in the damage. She saw the human soldiers helping the wounded, treating injuries, and offering comfort. They were doing more than just fighting. They were showing the Velmarans what it meant to stand together. "We did it," Kalia whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "We really did it." Carter stood beside her, his expression tired but proud. "This is just the beginning. We've shown them we can win. Now we have to keep fighting. Together." The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The XL Zor were far from beaten, but now they had something to fear: humanity and their new allies, the Velmarans. The victory at the supply camp had been hard-earned. The ground was littered with the remains of XL Zor equipment, the air thick with smoke, and the cries of the wounded echoing across the battlefield. Yet, despite the loss, there was an undeniable sense of achievement among the humans and Velmarans. They had proven that when they fought together, they could achieve the impossible. Admiral Carter stood by the ruins of the camp, looking over the aftermath. The sight was grim, but he couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. They had dealt a significant blow to the XL Zor, and the morale boost was enough to make them believe they could do it again. Kalia walked up to Carter, her face etched with both exhaustion and relief. She had been on the battlefield, leading her people in their first real combat. It had been overwhelming, but the Velmarans had held their ground. "We did it, Carter," she said, her voice soft, but filled with determination. "But we can't stop here." Carter nodded. He understood. "The XL Zor will come for us. They won't let this go. We need to strike while we have the advantage. They're going to regroup and come at us with everything they've got." Kalia's eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched. The thought of the XL Zor attacking again filled her with anger. They had already done enough damage to her planet, but now she could see the potential for a future where Velmera was free. If only they could keep up the fight. "We'll be ready," she said firmly. "We can't let them think they have us on the run." The Velmaran forces, still shaken but bolstered by their success, began to regroup. The humans shared their strategies for the next phase of the plan, teaching the Velmarans how to move more efficiently in combat, how to anticipate the enemy's moves. The alliance was growing, not just in numbers, but in strength and unity. The Velmaran people had always prided themselves on their knowledge, but now they were learning to be warriors, thanks to the guidance of the humans. As Carter watched the soldiers train, he realized that this war wasn't just about winning battles. It was about changing everything, for both races. The next few days were spent preparing for what was to come. The humans and Velmarans worked side by side, their shared efforts creating a bond that was becoming impossible to ignore. In every corner of the camp, soldiers trained, strategized, and planned. The tension in the air was palpable, but it was no longer the fear of uncertainty. Now, it was the energy of anticipation. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Carter said one evening as he gathered his team. "We've learned enough. Now it's time for the final push." The Excelsior's main stronghold is heavily fortified, but we know their weaknesses. We've got the weapons, the strategy, and the will to finish this." The Velmarans, now more confident than ever, nodded in agreement. They had seen what the humans could do, and they trusted in their guidance. The decision was made. It was time for the Alliance to strike at the heart of the enemy. In the days leading up to the attack, Carter and Kalia spent countless hours poring over the plans, making sure every detail was accounted for. They couldn't afford any mistakes. The Excelsior's stronghold was a fortress surrounded by thick walls, advanced technology, and enough soldiers to make it seem nearly impenetrable. But Carter wasn't intimidated. He had seen the Excelsior up close, and he knew their arrogance would be their downfall. "They're too confident," Carter said one night as he and Kalia looked over the map. "They'll never expect us to attack head-on. But that's exactly what we'll do." Kalia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You think we can break through their defenses?" "We don't need to break through," Carter replied with a grin. "We just need to outsmart them." The plan was set. The humans would infiltrate the stronghold under the cover of darkness, using stealth tactics that had proven effective in previous encounters. The Velmarans would provide the firepower, launching a diversionary attack from the outside, drawing the Excelsior's attention and creating openings for the humans to exploit. As they prepared for the final assault, there was a quiet confidence among the soldiers. They had fought together, built together, and now they would finish the job together. The Excelsior would not know what hit them. On the eve of the attack, Carter stood outside the camp, looking up at the stars. He could see the vastness of the galaxy stretching out before him, a reminder of how far they had come. When the war began, it felt like there was no hope. But now, with the Velmarans at his side, he felt something new, something powerful. Hope. "We've got this," Carter muttered to himself. "We have to." The battle for Velmera wasn't over, but now the Alliance was ready. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors. The night was quiet, but it was the calm before the storm. The stars above Velmera seemed distant, almost indifferent to the chaos that would soon unfold below. Inside the camp, there was no rest for the weary. Every soldier, both human and Velmaran, was preparing for the assault that could change the course of the war. They had worked tirelessly for this moment, and now the time had come. Admiral Carter stood at the front of the gathering, his face grim but resolute. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Excelsior's stronghold was located deep in the heart of Velmera's capital, a heavily fortified complex surrounded by miles of wilderness and enemy forces. The challenge wasn't just to get inside. It was to survive long enough to reach the heart of the Excelsior's command center and strike a decisive blow. "We've trained for this," Carter said, his voice carrying over the gathered soldiers. "We've fought together, and we've bled together. Tonight, we make sure Velmera stands free." Beside him, Kalia nodded. She had seen the terror that the Excelsior had brought to her people, and she knew this fight was more than just a military operation. It was a fight for freedom, a fight to protect her world from the invaders who had ravaged it for too long. "Stay focused," she added. "We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for our future. Every one of you is important in this mission. Do not let the fear get to you. We fight, and we win." The Velmarans had adapted quickly to human tactics, and they were ready. The Alliance was united, and they all knew that this assault would either end the war or bring about the darkest days of their lives. But there was no turning back now. The plan was divided into two parts. The humans, led by Carter, would infiltrate the stronghold from underground tunnels, a route that had been scouted in secret for months. They would move swiftly and quietly, striking from the shadows when the time was right. Meanwhile, the Velmarans would lead a diversionary attack on the outer walls, drawing the Excelsior forces away from the main entrance and providing cover for the humans' assault. As the soldiers moved out, there was a sense of unity in the air. Even in the face of danger, even with the unknown lying ahead, they knew they weren't alone. They were part of something greater now. The Alliance had become more than just a military force. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of cooperation. Carter's heart raced as he led the group through the underground tunnels, the faint glow of their flashlights casting long shadows against the stone walls. They moved with precision, knowing that even the slightest mistake could lead to disaster. But Carter had no doubt in his team. He had seen what they were capable of, and he knew they could handle whatever the Excelsior threw at them. "I'll take the lead," Carter whispered, his voice barely audible. "Follow me, and keep your eyes open." The tunnel ahead was narrow, twisting, and claustrophobic, but Carter was undeterred. They had to stay hidden. The Excelsior forces were on high alert, expecting an attack at any moment. Their arrogance might have been their downfall, but it also made them predictable. Kalia, leading her Velmaran forces outside, was more determined than ever. Her soldiers had never fought on this scale before, but they had the heart of warriors. As they approached the enemy's outer perimeter, Kalia gave the signal to her troops. The Velmarans began their assault, their weapons blazing as they charged toward the Excelsior defenses. The explosions from their first strikes lit up the sky, sending shockwaves through the ground. It was chaos. The Excelsior forces scrambled to respond, caught off guard by the unexpected ferocity of the attack. They had underestimated the Velmarans, thinking them weak and unprepared. Now, they were learning the truth. "Hold the line," Kalia shouted, rallying her troops. "We've got one chance. Push them back." The ground trembled beneath their feet as more explosions echoed from the outer walls. The diversion was working. The Excelsior were too busy dealing with the Velmarans to notice the humans slipping into the stronghold. Inside the tunnels, Carter and his team moved closer to their target. The sound of their footsteps was drowned out by the chaos above. They were nearly at the heart of the Excelsior's command center. Time was running out. "Almost there," Carter said, glancing over his shoulder. His team was moving swiftly, but there was still a risk. The Excelsior were not stupid. They would realize something was amiss sooner or later, but they had to keep moving. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a large chamber. Carter signaled for the team to halt. In the center of the room stood a massive control panel, the heart of the Excelsior's operations. The time had come to strike. With a deep breath, Carter stepped forward, his hand reaching for the controls. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment they would finally take the fight to the Excelsior and show them that humanity and Velmera would no longer bow down. The control room of the Excelsior stronghold was far more intimidating than Carter had imagined. The walls were made of thick, dark metal, and the air hummed with the constant buzz of advanced technology. Rows of screens flashed with information about the ongoing battle outside, but Carter's focus was on one thing: the massive control panel in the center of the room. It was now or never. "Stay sharp," Carter whispered to his team, each of them carefully positioned around the room. They had made it this far, and now they had to make sure that Excelsior didn't catch them before they completed their mission. Carter approached the console, his fingers trembling slightly as he prepared to input the access codes that would disable the Excelsior's defenses. He knew that if they succeeded here, they would deal a critical blow to the enemy's ability to fight back. But failure was not an option. There was no room for mistakes. As Carter began working on the control panel, a sound broke the silence. A loud, unmistakable crackling of static. It was coming from a speaker near the back of the room. Carter froze. Someone had triggered an alarm. The Excelsior were aware of their presence. "Get ready," Carter shouted, his voice low but urgent. The team quickly took defensive positions, weapons raised. A few seconds later, the door to the control room slammed open, and a squad of Excelsior soldiers stormed in, weapons drawn. They had expected the humans to be the only threat, but now they were facing both humans and Velmarans united. "You'll pay for this," one of the Excelsior soldiers sneered, his voice dripping with hatred. "You can't defeat us. We are invincible." The XL-Zor charged, their weapons firing in bursts of energy. The humans and Velmarans were ready, though, and the room became a chaotic blur of movement and gunfire. Carter's heart raced as he ducked behind a pillar, narrowly avoiding a blast. He could hear the steady thrum of Velmaran weaponry outside, as Kalia and her forces fought off XL-Zor reinforcements. "Carter, hurry." Kalia's voice came through his comms, tight with urgency. "We can't hold them off for long." Carter pushed forward, focusing all his attention on the control panel. He was so close. The timer was ticking. Every second counted. Just a little longer, he muttered to himself, his fingers moving quickly across the panel. His heart was pounding, but he had to finish this. If the XL-Zor could regain control of the stronghold, all would be lost. The door exploded open again, and another wave of soldiers entered. Carter's team fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. The XL-Zor seemed endless, and the pressure was mounting. But Carter knew that they couldn't give up now, not when they were so close to victory. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the room as the main door was blasted off its hinges. The sound of battle outside grew louder, and Carter felt a new wave of hope rush through him. "Hold your ground," Carter yelled to his team. "We're almost there." With a final push, Carter managed to breach the last security measure. The control panel flashed once, then went dark. The lights in the room flickered for a moment, and then everything went still. "We've done it," Carter breathed, a feeling of overwhelming relief washing over him. He turned to face his team, who were still holding off the XL-Zor soldiers. "The XL-Zor defenses are offline. The base is ours." Kalia's voice crackled through his comms. "Good work, Carter. We're securing the outer walls. We just need to hold on a little longer." The victory felt sweet, but Carter knew that the battle wasn't over yet. They still had to survive long enough for the Velmarans to secure the stronghold. But they had taken the first step. The heart of the XL-Zor's command was now in their hands. The humans and Velmarans quickly regrouped, pushing the remaining XL-Zor forces into a corner. The sound of gunfire continued to echo through the hallways, but the tide had turned. The XL-Zor, who had once believed themselves invincible, were now on the defensive. And for the first time, the humans and Velmarans were the ones calling the shots. Carter's team continued to press forward, clearing room after room, taking down the enemy with precision. There was no room for mercy, no time for hesitation. The XL-Zor had invaded their worlds, and now they were going to feel the cost of their arrogance. But as the humans and Velmarans advanced, Carter's mind couldn't shake the thought of the larger fight ahead. The XL-Zor were only a part of something much bigger. If they wanted to truly win this war, they would need more than just victory in this battle. They would need to dismantle the entire XL-Zor war machine, and that would mean going deeper into enemy territory, taking on even greater risks. For now, though, they had won a crucial battle. The stronghold was in their hands, and that was enough to prove something to the XL-Zor. Humanity and Velmera had not been defeated. They had risen together, and now the fight would continue. The control room was silent now, save for the steady hum of the equipment. The walls, once filled with XL-Zor commands, were now filled with human and Velmaran forces, working together to ensure the base's security. Carter wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes scanning the screens in front of him. The battle wasn't over, but the XL-Zor had lost their most strategic stronghold. This victory meant more than just the destruction of an enemy base. It meant that the XL-Zor's grip on the galaxy was slipping, and humanity was no longer the underdog. Kalia's voice crackled through his comms. "Carter, we've secured the outer walls. The remaining XL-Zor forces are retreating. It's over." A sigh of relief escaped Carter's lips, but he didn't let his guard down. The war was far from over. The XL-Zor might be retreating for now, but Carter knew this battle was only one piece of a much larger conflict. The galaxy was still in turmoil, and the Alliance had much more to do. The humans and Velmarans had proven themselves, But it would take much more than a single victory to truly turn the tide. "Good work, Kalia," Carter replied, his voice steady. "Let's make sure they don't come back." The final push had been exhausting. After taking the control room, the remaining Excelsior forces had tried to fight their way out, but the combined human and Velmaran strength had overwhelmed them. The stronghold was now firmly in the hands of the Alliance, and the Excelsior were retreating into the depths of their territory, nursing their wounds. The damage was done. Their command center had been shattered. But Carter couldn't help feeling uneasy. While this victory was significant, the Excelsior were not a species to be underestimated. They would regroup. They would retaliate. It was only a matter of time before the Alliance would face them again. "We've won the battle," Carter said, turning to face his team. "But this war is far from over. We'll need to regroup, rethink our strategy. The Excelsior are still out there." Kalia nodded, her face set in determination. "We've proven we can stand against them. Now it's time to finish what we started." They had come a long way since the first days of the Alliance. The Velmarans and humans had faced countless challenges together, learning to trust each other, to fight together. Each victory, no matter how small, was a reminder that they were stronger together than apart. Carter had seen it firsthand. The strength of the Velmaran people, their resilience, their courage. It had inspired him and his team, and they had come to understand each other in ways no one had thought possible. As they walked through the corridors of the stronghold, clearing the remaining pockets of Excelsior soldiers, Carter felt a sense of pride. Humanity had made a place for itself in the galaxy. They were no longer just a forgotten species, struggling to survive. They were a force to be reckoned with. But the war wasn't over, and Carter knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. The Excelsior would come back. They had to be ready. The rest of the Alliance members were already working, preparing for the next stage. The Velmarans had set up temporary command posts, coordinating the defense of the base and sending out communications to their home world, reporting their victory. "This is just the beginning," Kalia said, her voice full of resolve as she approached Carter. "We've shown the galaxy what we're capable of. Now we take the fight to the Excelsior." Carter smiled grimly. "We'll be ready. Together." As he looked around the room at the united forces of humans and Velmarans, he knew that this victory would be remembered throughout the galaxy. It would be the spark that would ignite a chain reaction, a symbol of hope for those who had been oppressed, for those who had lost everything to the Excelsior. This victory was not just for them, but for everyone who believed in the power of unity. "We have one last task," Carter said, his voice commanding the attention of the room. "We need to send a message to the Excelsior, to the galaxy." He walked toward the communications console, his fingers hovering over the keys. With one press, he would broadcast their message to the entire galaxy. Humanity, standing strong, alongside their new allies, ready to fight back. The room fell silent as Carter's fingers tapped in the coordinates for the message. He paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts, then spoke. "This is the voice of humanity. We are no longer the weak, the forgotten. We have risen. We are here to stay. And we will fight, side by side with the Velmarans, and any who choose to stand with us. The Excelsior's days are numbered. This is just the beginning." As the message broadcasted across the galaxy, Carter couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had done it. The first step toward victory had been taken, and now the entire galaxy would know. Humanity was no longer alone. And as the message echoed through space, Carter felt a renewed sense of hope. This fight was far from over, but humanity had shown the galaxy that they would not go down quietly. They were ready for the challenges ahead, ready to stand united against any who threatened their future.